Senators tried. Senators tried and threatened and then ultimately failed to attach an amendment to that defense bill that would have imposed new sanctions on Iran. If they had succeeded, that would have blown up the diplomatic channel that we have just opened with Iran over its nuclear program. And you know what? If you close the only promising diplomatic channel that there is with Iran, that makes the use of military force against Iran by us or by somebody else about 99% more likely. I mean, think about it. If you have an intractable conflict with somebody that just must be resolved, if, for example, Iran were saying we're getting a nuclear weapon and we and the rest of the world were saying, no, you aren't, that is an issue that has to be resolved one way or the other, right? That is an intractable thing. There's no compromise on half a bomb, right? It's either you or me. If you have an intractable conflict with somebody and you agree to not settle it by talking anymore, how else are you going to settle it? But to review, we didn't get the Let's Debate Afghanistan amendment, we didn't get the Anti-Sexual Assault amendment, and we didn't get the Iran Sanctions Let's Start a War amendment. Well, guess which one of those three might get passed anyway? Yes, of course, that's right. It's behind door number Let's Have a War. Foreign Policy magazine was first to break the news last night that a bipartisan group of U.S. senators has plans to pass a standalone measure, so not related to the defense bill, its own thing, a standalone measure, to blow up diplomacy with Iran. They're calling it the Nuclear Weapon-Free Iran Act of 2013, and it is a bill that would impose new sanctions on Iran. Now, to be clear, Iran is already under sanctions. Years and years and years and years of difficult and increasingly impossible to live under sanctions. That is at least part of what got them to the negotiating table, where we literally are right now. Today, right now, we are literally, at this moment, negotiating with Iran at a negotiating table, talking with them about ending their nuclear program. The talks so far have led to progress. They have stopped enrichment already. It is a 6-month experiment. There are daily inspections in Iranian nuclear facilities by international inspectors now to make sure that they are keeping to their side of the bargain. It is happening already. It is underway. If the U.S. Congress passes more sanctions now, or passes more sanctions now that would go into effect in the future at some specific date, or that would have some trigger attached to what we are negotiating with them about already, Iran has already said explicitly, in no uncertain terms, that if the U.S. Congress did that, that would mean no more talking. Diplomacy is over. In the very direct words of the Iranian foreign minister, when he was asked what Iran would do if the U.S. Congress passed a new round of sanctions, he answered very directly. He said, quote, "The entire deal, then, is dead." So this is not a secret. He said this in an interview with Time magazine, which isn't even all that hard to get. If the Congress passes a new sanctions bill right now, then diplomatic channels which are working will close. And if we are not going to resolve the issue of Iran's nuclear program by diplomacy, then how exactly are we going to solve it? The lead senator proposing the new sanctions is Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey, who is a Democrat. And if his bill came to a vote, conventional wisdom has long been that it would pass with flying colors, because obviously every Republican would vote for it, and all of these Democrats would vote for it at least. Senator Menendez, Senator Schumer, Senator Cardin, Senator Casey, Senator Coons, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Begich, Senator Pryor, Senator Landrieu, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Warner, Senator Hagan, Senator Donnelly. They're all co-sponsors. They're all Democrats. You add those Democrats to the Republicans, and you know what? You want to pass that thing? No problem. Conventional wisdom has been that whatever else Republicans and Democrats disagree on, no matter how intractably divided Democrats and Republicans are on partisan lines, on other issues, when it comes to the war with Iran, well, conventional wisdom has been that not only would the war with Iran bill pass, it might even pass with a veto-proof majority. But a funny thing happened on the way to our next big land war in Asia. A big unexpected group of senators today decided to yank back on the reins. Now, Bob Menendez is not the most famous senator in the country, but Bob Menendez is very, very senior in the Senate, and he is very powerful. He is chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. Here's the thing, though. There are only 16 standing committees in the U.S. Senate. So the 16 committees, 16 chairs. Senator Menendez is the chair of one of the committees. Today, an amazing thing happened when the chairs of 10 other committees wrote to Harry Reid today and told him no. No, don't do it. Don't do what Bob Menendez is asking you to do. Do not call for a vote on this bill. And some of these senators, as you can see, are not exactly Dennis Kucinich, right? These include some real Iran hawks. But these 10 committee chairmen Democratic senators who chair committees in the Senate wrote to Reid today saying, do not do it. The sanctions bill is a mistake, and we, 10 of your 16 chairmen, want to be asked about this thing. If you were even thinking about doing anything on this, we think it's a really bad move. From the letter, quote, at this time, when negotiations are ongoing, we believe that new sanctions would play into the hands of those in Iran who are most eager to see the negotiations fail. Those in Iran? Yeah, also those here, too. The White House today said that they don't believe that these sanctions should be enacted or will be enacted. And if they are right about the will be enacted part of it, if they are right that this is not going to happen, that Bob Menendez is going to fail here, then today we may have just avoided the start of our next war with the country that forms the oil-rich landmass between one country on its left, called Iraq, and another country on its right, called Afghanistan. Joining us now is Steve Clemons. He's a senior fellow at the New America Foundation. He's also Washington editor-at-large for The Atlantic magazine. Steve, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Great to be with you, Rachel.
So why do you think we saw this last thing we're going to do before Christmas push today for a standalone new effort at sanctions?
Well, there's enormous pressure, and it's primarily from domestic political sources in the United States that see a zero-sum game in the Middle East and are putting extraordinary pressure on certain senators, many Republican senators, but of course, you know, on the Democratic side, as you said, is leading are people like Chuck Schumer, but particularly Robert Menendez, and they want to kill the deal. I have been told tonight that the President of the United States, Barack Obama, has communicated to these senators that he will veto this if it were to pass, which is new news and I think very important. I've heard from another very senior administration official who is arguing that Bob Menendez, if he gets the way he wants to go, is going to trip us into a war. So the stakes, as you've defined them, are very, very high. And this is not just another crank at the wheel on sanctions. This is a very important historic moment in U.S. diplomatic history to systemically change the relationship of the United States with another key nation that has been problematic for us for 3 decades. This is a Nixon goes to China moment. And it would be like the U.S. Senate handicapping and kind of cutting the legs out from underneath Richard Nixon in normalizing China. That's how big this is.
Because of the domestic political pressures, and it's groups like AIPAC, I think, leading the way. They've sort of been seen as the lead push on this in terms of an outside group, but it's also other groups as well. In terms of that domestic political pressure and the way that Democratic senators as well as Republicans are susceptible to it, if Bob Menendez could get Harry Reid to allow a vote on this, and if the Senate could vote on it, do you think there's a chance that it could pass with a veto-proof majority? Could the White House get their bluff called on vetoing it?
I think that's a possibility, but I think that the White House is demonstrating that it will go to all measures that it can, and the personal involvement of the president at many levels to prevent that from happening, and to communicate to people how serious that will be, because that will lock us in to a track that will lead us to a hard conflict with Iran. We're not going to see a leadership in Iran better than we have now to test the possibility of a different course. You know, the White House has basically said, we will impose sanctions within a day if negotiations fail. That this isn't buying, you know, hook, line, and sinker everything we see in Iran, where we haven't talked to them for 30 years. But fundamentally, they are saying if that this were not to come together, the administration itself supports new sanctions to try to take Iran forward. So I think that the issue here is not one of earnestness by many of the senators involved. It's designed to sabotage what the White House is doing, which is extraordinary. And I think the White House is really demonstrating, and I heard people like the State Department deputy spokesman and others today with almost ferocious turf protecting on this and saying we're not going to yield an inch. There will not be an inch yielded in this battle, first with Bob Menendez, and they're not going to lose this historic possibility with Iran.
Steve Clemons, senior fellow at the New America Foundation, Washington editor-at-large for The Atlantic magazine. Steve, thanks for helping us understand this. This is high-stakes stuff. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Rachel.
I will say that last point that Steve was making about the timing, to me, is the big reveal here, right? Because if you took them on face value in terms of what they're trying to do, they're saying, well, what if Iran cheats with this deal? We're passing the sanctions bill that says if they cheated, then these sanctions would go into effect. You know what? If they cheated, they could then pass a sanctions bill then. They'd get 100 votes in the U.S. Senate for it if they wanted to do it then. By doing it now, the only point is to stop diplomacy and make it more likely that we're going to war with Iran. It's the only reason to do this. A vote for this thing is a vote to go to war with Iran. That's why they're going to lose the fight. I'll be right back.